Invincible is back, and not only that, but it'll be my first time watching this show along with everyone else. I checked out season 1 only a few months ago, that video will be linked now unless I forget, but now, obviously, I'm caught up on this evil Superman, comic-adapted, brutally bloody show. So how was its latest installment? Well, let me do my spoiler warning, if you would be so kind. That's it, and for all the people who've watched, let's talk. The very first thing we get in the premiere is a completely different universe, and this sequence gives us about 4 different major parts of the story. Firstly, Mark is super evil in this universe, and he's teamed up with Nolan to take over just like he wanted. This leads into Mark in the regular universe questioning if he will become his dad, and one of the characters who we will talk about in literally seconds mentions that most versions of him end up being the bad guy. Second, Nolan himself. Unsurprisingly, after flying off to a different planet, Nolan doesn't really show up in this episode, so they decide to hand his screen time over to this counterpart of his, and he's great, of course, it's still J.K. Simmons. Third, one of the Rebellion members, Angstrom Levy, becomes a main player after he's saved from Mark and Nolan by a random portal. And fourth, just the multiverse in general. I expressed how annoyed I was with all the multiverses in one of my reviews of the Fiona and Cake series, but by the end of this episode, I don't have many, if any, problems with how it's done here, to the point where it's not even clear if it will be that relevant anymore. Somewhat relevant for sure, but I think we're sticking to mostly just one universe for this season, and that's nice. So clearly this opening sequence is incredibly dense. Even though I think the idea of some evil version of Mark is a bit predictable and tropey, getting to see him and Omni-Man go against the rest of the heroes shows that, just like his dad, Mark is so powerful that barely anyone stands a chance against him, especially when he uses his powers for evil. This plot may be simple on the surface, but they managed to make it very layered and interesting, so I have to say, I'm a big fan of this beginning. We also get the first, and maybe second, I don't remember, of many title card teases, but it doesn't happen. Now we return to the actual universe, where we're still sort of in this grieving period after the finale of Season 1. I have to say, this is another idea that I don't love on the surface, since a shocking amount of time in the finale was already devoted to downtime. That was like half the episode. But after only a few scenes of Mark returning to his normal life, which are pretty solid, the episode gets to the action, or at least some major plot points. The first to address is what happened to Angstrom Levy after he fell through the portal. We discover that a separate version of him with powers to create portals between universes saved a ton of versions of himself for a project he hires the Mauler twins for. There's this funny gag where they bring back the same guard that got his ass beat in the last season, who is extremely anxious about being duped again, but in the end there was no chance for him since the two just escaped through magical portals in their cells. After some convincing, the Mauler twins sign on, and I gotta say, there's something so satisfying about seeing these guys work. The idea of 2 brutes that yell at each other all the time while also being super smart is really enjoyable. Eventually they complete the machine, which is this weird giant system that'll send all the memories and knowledge of the other angstroms into the main angstrom. In the end, it doesn't really matter which one it sends this all to, as they will essentially all just become one guy. Super crazy spoilers, he's gonna become one of the villains, and I don't know how I feel about that. There's some part of me that says that even a villain whose shtick is that they're overly smart would just get crushed by Omni-Man. I'm sorry, but Nolan has set such a high standard that it's difficult for other villains to even exist in this show, but I will admit, I like Angstrom, and I like Sterling K. Brown in the role. I guess we'll just have to wait for him to develop for me to care more. We'll get back to this plot later. The second plot I want to touch on is actually pretty disconnected, that being Debbie's. Debbie was one of my favorite characters in Season 1, and she's just as good here. While Mark does have to do his superhero stuff sometimes, Debbie doesn't, so I'm actually fine with the majority of this season being her working through her trauma. She starts out with a talk with Olga, Red Rush's widow, who returned to the States after Omni-Man went sicko mode on his own son. Honestly, these scenes feel so nice and calm. There's that hint of sadness every time Nolan is brought up, but there's something so sweet about the normalcy. I also felt a lot of satisfaction seeing Debbie not give Nolan any benefit of the doubt, even if she does miss him being around. She knows he's an insane psycho who doesn't care about her. It's just going to be hard to live with that. Debbie is one of the most down-to-earth characters on the show, so these regular conversations always end up being some of the best moments of the episodes they're in. I also hope Olga returns again because the two of them bounce off of each other great. And for the third plot, we're in the action zone, baby, because this is the Mark section. Mark begins by talking to Amber and later Eve, who both generally ask just how he's doing. It's pretty obvious at this point that Mark has emotionally healed a decent amount. He is doing better, but he's got new problems. being his previously mentioned self-doubt about becoming the same as his father. Still, he gets Cecil to bring him back as a recruit and goes on his first mission, which just happens to be to stop Angstrom and the Mahler twins from finishing up their science project. Thinking it's a threat and or a dangerous plot against the good guys, Mark starts annihilating the Mahler twins and all their other variants. After a bit though, he gets overwhelmed and we get our classic Mark gets the shit kicked out of him scene. It's a bit early for a scene like this, but I was never worried he was actually going to die, so I figure they'll be going much further at various points during the season. Angstrom's worried he's going to die though, so the dumbass takes off the helmet that is being used to merge all versions of him in the middle of the experiment, and obviously that doesn't go well. The whole place explodes, killing all the Maulers but one, and all the Angstroms but one. Those guys show up later though. For now we just see Mark surviving the explosion, and him being approached afterwards by the Guardians of the Globe, who do have a subplot this episode, but it's not really that important. They all reassure him that it's fine, and so does Cecil, but it's clear that this was another moment for Mark that convinces him he's the bad guy. Around here we cut to the credits, but I was convinced that there had to be an end credit scene. The place the episode ended felt abrupt, and also despite there being a shit ton of teasing, we hadn't gotten a title card. So I skipped ahead only about 20 seconds, and there it was. Confirmation that one of the Mahler twins survived, meaning those guys are still characters, making me quite happy, and also confirmation that the original Angstrom survived. Not only that, but the experiment kinda worked. He does seem to have the memories and knowledge of all the other variants, but the downside is that he's got this weird deformed head shape now that extends all the way onto his back. It's not nice to look at. In fact, I don't know if I will like looking at it for the rest of the season. So since Mark ruined his experiment and deformed him, and he has all the knowledge of the other variants of himself who hate the evil Mark from their respective universes, Angstrom says, "I'm going to kill," and then the title card hits and it's raw as hell. Now it's fully red and starts cracking. Are you kidding me? I'm so hyped. That's pretty much everything wrapped up. We've set up the plot with Mark questioning if he's a hero, the Debbie Depression plot, and this new villain, so it was a pretty solid opener. I'm gonna go with an 8 out of 10 for a lesson for your next life, as there were some sort of dull moments where I wish the story could speed up, and the Guardian subplot still had a good amount of robot in it, who I hate, but outside of that, everything was fun, exciting, or emotional. I also want to mention the animation, which I think has been slightly improved, but barely changed, and I gotta respect that. Even though the animation isn't the best, they're sticking with their style, and I think the style works, so it's a fair decision in my opinion. That'll be all. Thank you for watching. Leave a like and all that jazz. November's been a month I've been waiting for, with lots of shows starting up that I've been desperate to watch, so expect some varied content for the next few weeks. Maybe, just maybe, there will be an open spot for another Invincible review. We'll have to see. Bye now. New Loki episode was good, by the way.